Sir, keep your hands where I can see them.
For what?
You were circling the block. That's suspicious behavior.
That's called doing my job.
Well, your job is making neighbors nervous. I need your ID.
DA, I'm in the middle of an active narcotics operation.
Oh, shit.
Good thing your body cam is capturing all of this. Perfect for the lawsuit.
On a quiet suburban street on a clear afternoon, a rookie officer turns a routine patrol stop into a career-ending disaster. His body camera rolls as he confronts a black man simply standing beside an unmarked vehicle. Calm, composed, hands on his hips. But when the cop demands ID and starts escalating without cause, the man's response freezes everything. Because what the rookie didn't know is that the man he just tried to arrest wasn't a criminal at all. He was a federal agent, deep undercover, working a high-level narcotics operation. And that single reckless decision, it wouldn't just expose the rookie's bias and incompetence, it would cost the department $10 million. This is the story of how one rookie officer destroyed his own career in under 3 minutes, captured on Bodycam, exposed in court, and remembered as one of the most expensive mistakes in police department history. Before we continue, where are you watching from? If this is your first time here, please hit that subscribe button. Stories like these need to be shared, and your support helps us bring more truth to light.
August 22nd, 2024, Phoenix, Arizona. The Axon Bodycam footage begins at 3:12 p.m. on a Thursday afternoon in a suburban Phoenix neighborhood. Quiet streets, manicured lawns, the kind of area where residents pay HOA fees and suspicious activity means a package sitting on a porch too long. Officer Ryan Matthews was 23 years old, 5 months out of the academy, still operating with that dangerous mixture of eagerness and inexperience that makes rookie cops see crime in ordinary behavior. His training evaluations had noted concerns: overly aggressive in traffic stop scenarios, difficulty distinguishing between reasonable suspicion and assumption, but none of these red flags prevented his graduation or street assignment. Matthews was patrolling his assigned sector when he noticed something that triggered his attention. A black male, late 30s, athletic build, standing beside a dark sedan parked on a residential street. The man was checking his phone, occasionally glancing up and down the block. To Matthews, this looked suspicious. To anyone else, it looked like someone waiting for a call or checking directions. What Matthews didn't know, what he had no way of knowing because interagency communication protocols had failed, was that the man wasn't a criminal. He was Special Agent Marcus Williams, Drug Enforcement Administration, 12 years of service. Currently deep in month 4 of a long-term surveillance operation targeting a fentanyl distribution network operating through Phoenix's suburban corridors. Agent Williams was rotating vehicles every few hours to avoid pattern detection. He'd been tracking a suspected distributor who lived 3 houses down from where he currently stood. The surveillance was delicate, time-sensitive, and required absolute discretion. Any disruption could scatter targets and destroy months of investigative work. Matthews' patrol car slowed. His body cam captured his perspective as he studied Williams through the windshield. A black man, nice car, residential neighborhood, looking around. In Matthews' limited experience, this combination suggested drug dealing or casing houses for burglary. He activated his emergency lights and pulled to the curb behind Williams. Williams noticed the patrol car immediately. His first reaction was controlled concern, not for himself, but for the operation. Local police presence near his surveillance location could alert targets. He remained calm, maintaining his cover posture, while mentally calculating how to quickly resolve this encounter without compromising the operation. Matthews exited his vehicle, his body cam recording, as he approached. His hand rested on his duty belt near his service weapon. His stride was purposeful, aggressive, the body language of someone who had already decided this encounter would require assertive control. "Sir, keep your hands where I can see them," Matthews called out, while still several yards away. Williams complied immediately, placing his hands on his hips in a non-threatening posture. His voice was steady when he responded. "For what?" "You are circling the block. That's suspicious behavior." His expression showed controlled frustration. "That's called doing my job." The statement hung in the air. ambiguous enough to be innocent, specific enough to hint that this situation was more complicated than Matthews understood. But Matthews heard only defiance. Your job? What job involves circling a residential block multiple times? Officer, I need you to understand something. This is a sensitive situation. I need to speak with your supervisor immediately. The request should have been a signal. Civilians who demand supervisors during traffic stops are either entitled or have legitimate authority. Williams' tone suggested the latter, but Matthews interpreted it as challenge.
You're not making demands right now. I'm conducting an investigation, license, and registration. Williams made a calculation. Revealing his identity too early could compromise the operation if Matthews radioed it over open channels that suspects might monitor. But refusing to identify could escalate the encounter into something dangerous. I'm going to reach into my jacket pocket. Slowly. I'm not armed for this operation. I'm retrieving my identification. Matthews' hand moved to his weapon. Stop! Don't reach for anything. I need to show you my credentials to end this situation. I said don't reach. Keep your hands visible. Williams' hands remained on his hips, but his voice carried new edge. Officer, you're making a serious mistake. I'm trying to help you avoid a situation you don't understand. The only mistake here is you refusing my lawful commands. The body cam captured the standoff. Williams standing calmly with hands visible. Matthews positioned aggressively, hand near weapon, voice rising with each exchange. Two men operating from completely different frameworks of what this encounter was. A neighbor emerged from a nearby house, drawn by the sight of police lights. She pulled out her phone and began recording the civilian footage that would later be synchronized with the body cam, creating dual documentation of what unfolded. Matthews noticed the audience, felt the pressure of witnesses, made the decision that would destroy his career. Turn around, hands behind your back, you're being detained. Williams didn't move. Detained for what? I'm standing on a public street. I haven't committed any violation. Suspicious activity. Refusing lawful commands. Obstruction. None of those are accurate, and I'm going to show you why. Williams moved his hand slowly toward his jacket. I'm reaching for my credentials. I'm doing this carefully and visibly. What I'm about to show you will end this encounter and probably end your career. Have you ever seen someone stay this calm while being profiled? Tell me your thoughts below. Officer Ryan Matthews' voice rose with alarm. I said don't reach. Stop moving or I will tase you. Special Agent Marcus Williams' hand continued moving slowly toward his inside jacket pocket. Not aggressive, not fast, but deliberate. The movement of someone who knew that what he was about to reveal would change everything. I'm a federal agent. What I'm showing you is my DEA badge and credentials. I'm going to pull them out now. Matthews drew his taser. Hands up, now! Williams finally stopped. His hand was inside his jacket, but not yet withdrawing anything. His voice remained steady, but carried weight now. Officer, if you tase me, if you arrest me, if you compromise the operation I'm conducting, the consequences for your department will be catastrophic. I'm asking you one more time. Call your supervisor before this gets worse. But Matthews had crossed a psychological threshold. Authority had been challenged, commands ignored, and in his 5 months of experience, retreat felt like defeat. Last warning, hands up or I deploy. Williams pulled his hand from his jacket, held out a black leather credential case, opened it slowly so the body cam would capture every detail. Inside was a gold DEA badge, official identification card showing his photo, rank, and years of service. Federal credentials that instantly transformed the encounter from routine stop to catastrophic mistake.
I'm DEA Special Agent Marcus Williams, badge number 4721. I'm conducting an active narcotics operation, surveilling a distribution network operating in this area. I've been on this operation for 4 months. And you just rolled up with lights on, announcing police presence to every target within a 6-block radius. Matthews' taser lowered. His voice came out weak. I didn't know. There was no notification. There wouldn't be notification to local patrol. This is a federal undercover operation, which is why I tried to tell you to call your supervisor before you escalated. The neighbor recording the encounter moved closer, her phone capturing audio clearly. He's DEA? Oh my God, the cop just stopped a DEA agent? Matthews' radio crackled. He fumbled for it, his hands shaking now. Dispatch, I need a supervisor. Priority. Williams closed his credentials case. His voice carried controlled fury beneath professional calm. You approached me without reasonable suspicion. You ignored my request to speak with supervision. You drew a weapon on a federal agent during an active operation. And you did all of this because you saw a black man in a car and decided that was suspicious. Sir, I was just doing my job. Your job requires reasonable suspicion before conducting stops. What reasonable suspicion did you have? Be specific. Matthew struggled for justification. You were circling the block multiple times. I was conducting surveillance, which you would have learned if you'd asked questions instead of immediately treating me as a criminal. A second patrol car arrived, responding to Matthew's backup call. Officer Jessica Torres exited quickly, her body cam capturing the scene from a new angle. She took in the situation. Matthews looking stricken, Williams holding federal credentials, neighbor recording. What's going on? Torres asked cautiously. Williams held up his badge. DEA Agent Williams, your officer conducted an unlawful stop that compromised a months-long federal narcotics investigation. Torres looked at the badge, then at Matthews with visible horror. Ryan, what did you do? Before Matthews could respond, Williams' phone rang. He answered, stepping away slightly. The body cam captured one side of the conversation, Williams explaining to his supervisor that local police had just blown his cover in the surveillance area. When he finished the call, his expression was grim. My operation is compromised. Targets are scattering. 4 months of work destroyed because a rookie cop saw a black man in a car and decided that was suspicious. Sir, I was just doing my job. Your job requires reasonable suspicion before conducting stops. What reasonable suspicion did you have? Be specific. Matthew struggled for justification. You were circling the block multiple times. I was conducting surveillance, which you would have learned if you'd asked questions instead of immediately treating me as a criminal. A supervisor's vehicle arrived. Sergeant Chen exited and immediately assessed the catastrophe from everyone's body language. Matthews looked pale. Torres stood at careful distance from the situation. Williams stood holding federal credentials with the posture of someone barely containing professional rage. I'm Sergeant Chen. Someone want to explain what's happening? Williams provided concise summary. The surveillance operation, Matthews' unlawful stop, the compromised investigation, the racial profiling, the drawn weapon, all documented on multiple cameras.
Chen's expression darkened as the account progressed. He looked at Matthews. You stopped a federal agent during an undercover operation. Matthews nodded miserably. On what grounds? He was circling the block. That's not reasonable suspicion, Ryan. That's barely observation. Chen turned to Williams. Agent, I don't know what to say except this should never have happened. I'm placing Officer Matthews on immediate administrative leave. There will be a full investigation. Williams' phone rang again. Another conversation with federal supervisors. When he finished, his voice was tight. I need to leave this area immediately. Your presence has alerted every target in my surveillance zone. My supervisor is pulling me from the operation. He looked at Matthews one more time. Officer, you made assumptions based on my race. You ignored my attempts to de-escalate. You drew a weapon on a federal agent, and you destroyed months of investigative work. I will be filing a formal complaint. I will be providing testimony about this encounter, and I will be pursuing civil rights litigation. Williams got in his vehicle and drove away. The body cam footage shows Matthews standing on the sidewalk, understanding that his brief law enforcement career had just ended in spectacular failure. If you were the agent, would you have stayed calm or snapped? Let me know. Within 2 hours, DEA Phoenix Division had filed formal complaint with Phoenix Police Department. The complaint was detailed and damning. Officer Matthews had interfered with active federal investigation through unlawful stop based on racial profiling. The stop lacked reasonable suspicion. Matthews' refusal to call supervisor despite repeated requests showed poor judgment. Drawing taser on subject who identified as federal agent exceeded any reasonable use of force standard. The complaint also quantified operational damage. 4 months of surveillance work destroyed. Targets scattered. Distributors alerted to law enforcement presence. Months of federal resources wasted because rookie officer could not distinguish between surveillance and suspicious activity. Phoenix Police Chief Patricia Rodriguez reviewed the body cam footage that evening. Her reaction was captured in internal emails later subpoenaed during litigation. "This is catastrophic. We stopped a DEA agent during an undercover op. No reasonable suspicion. Racial profiling obvious. Weapon drawn. Everything documented. This will cost us millions." Internal Affairs opened investigation immediately. Lead investigator Detective Raymond Walsh reviewed all body cam angles, Matthews, Torres, Chen's. Also obtained civilian recordings showing encounter from a different perspective. The documentation was comprehensive and indefensible. Walsh's preliminary report noted, Officer Matthews conducted stop without articulable reasonable suspicion. Subject activities, standing by vehicle, checking phone, observing the surroundings, are not inherently suspicious. Matthews' escalation, despite subject's calm demeanor and requests for supervisor, demonstrated poor judgment. Drawing taser on subject who identified as federal agent showed excessive force. The stop appears motivated by racial assumptions rather than legitimate law enforcement purpose. The report also examined Matthews' academy records, found evaluations noting aggressive tendencies in simulated stops, found instructors' concerns about inability to distinguish reasonable suspicion from personal assumption, found a pattern suggesting Matthews should have received remedial training before street assignment. The findings revealed institutional failure, not just Matthews' error, but department's failure to address warning signs before they resulted in a federal incident. DEA filed additional documentation, operational reports showing the scope of the compromised investigation, financial accounting of resources expended over 4 months, witness statements from other agents describing how Matthews' intervention scattered their surveillance targets. The damage wasn't just professional embarrassment, it was measurable operational loss. Federal money spent on investigation that had to be abandoned, criminal network that escaped prosecution because rookie cop made assumptions about skin color. Phoenix PD brass understood the exposure. Legal department provided liability assessment. Agent Williams has clear civil rights claim. Fourth Amendment violation obvious. Racial profiling documented. Interference with federal operation adds unique damages. Prior complaints about Matthews show department awareness of his tendencies. Settlement should be anticipated in 7-figure range. But before settlement discussions began, the decision about Matthews' employment had to be made. His union representation argued for suspension and retraining. Officer made error in judgment, but didn't act with malicious intent. Termination should be reserved for most egregious conduct, but the body cam evidence undermined claims of innocent error. Matthews' aggressive approach from first contact, his refusal to call a supervisor despite repeated requests, his escalation despite Williams' visible calm, his drawn weapon after seeing federal credentials. The conduct showed pattern of bias and poor judgment, not one-time mistake. Internal Affairs recommended termination. Officer Matthews' actions violated department policy, constitutional standards, and interagency cooperation protocols. His conduct destroyed federal investigation and exposed department to significant liability. Continued employment would signal that such behavior is tolerable. The recommendation was upheld. Matthews was terminated after 5 months of service. His law enforcement career ended before it truly began. Do you think the rookie deserves a second chance? Or was this the end? Drop your opinion. Special Agent Marcus Williams filed his federal civil rights lawsuit 4 months after the encounter. The complaint alleged Fourth Amendment violations through unlawful seizure, 14th Amendment violations through racial discrimination, interference with federal operations, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. The evidence was overwhelming. 3 body cam angles, civilian recording, Matthews' academy evaluations showing prior concerns, DEA operational reports documenting damage, expert testimony about racial profiling patterns and constitutional standards,
Phoenix initially offered $400,000 to settle quickly and avoid trial publicity. Williams rejected it. The offer felt like hush money, payment to make embarrassing situation disappear without forcing institutional reckoning. "This isn't about money," Williams told his attorneys. "It's about accountability. Matthews racially profiled me and destroyed months of work. The department hired him despite warning signs and failed to supervise adequately. That pattern needs to be exposed, not buried under confidential settlement." The case went to trial. Jury selection revealed how the body cam footage had shaped public perception. Many potential jurors had seen the video. Some had strong opinions about police conduct. Final jury was demographically mixed. Several people with law enforcement in their families, several from communities experiencing frequent police stops. The prosecution's opening statement was direct. "You're going to watch body cam footage showing Officer Matthews approach Agent Williams without reasonable suspicion. You'll hear Matthews refuse to call a supervisor despite repeated requests. You'll see him draw a weapon on a federal agent. And you'll hear expert testimony about how racial assumptions drove every decision Matthews made." Defense attempted to frame Matthews as young officer, making honest mistake. He was trying to protect his community. He saw behavior he thought was suspicious. He made wrong judgment call, but acted without malicious intent. But the body cam undermined that narrative. The prosecution played all angles. Matthews approaching aggressively without cause. Williams remaining calm and requesting supervisor. Matthews escalating despite no threatening behavior. The taser being drawn. The badge reveal. Matthews' stricken expression realizing his catastrophic error. Jury members leaned forward during the footage. Several took notes. One visibly shook her head when Matthews drew his taser despite Williams' calm demeanor. Williams testified about his experience, described being racially profiled while conducting federal law enforcement duties, explained the operational damage, 4 months of surveillance destroyed, distribution network scattering, federal resources wasted.
He also described ongoing impact, hypervigilance during operations, worrying about local police interference, anxiety about future encounters where his badge might not be enough to prevent violence, the psychological toll of knowing that even federal credentials don't protect black agents from racial assumptions. Medical experts testified about PTSD symptoms. Having a weapon drawn on you during lawful activity creates lasting trauma, regardless of victim's training or profession. Matthews testified in his defense, claimed he genuinely believed Williams looked suspicious, insisted racial profiling wasn't intentional, suggested he would have stopped anyone circling the block, regardless of race. Cross-examination was brutal. Williams' attorney played body cam footage alongside Matthews' testimony, pointing out inconsistencies. "Officer Matthews, you testified you would have stopped anyone, but Agent Williams was simply standing by his vehicle checking his phone. Can you show the jury what about that behavior required police intervention?" Matthews struggled. "He'd been circling." "How many times?" "You testified he'd circled multiple times. The body cam shows you observing for less than 2 minutes before stopping him. How many circles did you actually observe?" Pause. "I saw him once, but dispatch had mentioned." "Dispatch mentioned what?" "There's no radio traffic about Agent Williams. You invented that justification." Expert witnesses reinforced the obvious. A retired police chief testified that Matthews' stop lacked any legitimate law enforcement basis, that standing by a vehicle and checking one's phone isn't suspicious activity, that Matthews' refusal to call supervisor despite repeated requests violated basic procedure. A civil rights attorney explained how racial profiling operates, that officers often claim objective reasons for stops, but data shows they consistently perceive black individuals as more suspicious than white people engaged in identical behavior. The defense called use of force experts, arguing Matthews' response was proportional.
but prosecution countered that proportionality requires actual threat. Williams exhibited zero threatening behaviors. His hands were visible, his voice calm, his requests reasonable. Drawing a taser was excessive force given the circumstances. Closing arguments framed stakes clearly. Prosecution: Officer Matthews saw a black man and made assumptions, ignored attempts to de-escalate, drew a weapon on a federal agent, destroyed 4 months of investigative work. This requires substantial damages to deter such conduct. Defense: young officer made judgment error. No one was injured. He was trying to do his job. Don't punish honest mistake with excessive verdict. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they returned, the verdict was clear. Liable on all counts. Fourth Amendment violation, racial discrimination, interference with federal operations.
Afternoon, sir. We got reports of a gang member in the area.
Okay, so why me?
Because I said so. ID now.
Officer, you're making a mistake.
You will be detained if you speak one more time.
U.S. Marshal leading a fugitive arrest 2 blocks from here.
Oh boy.
Your body cam just recorded the end of your career.
On a quiet spring morning in Brook Hill Estates, a rookie officer made a mistake that would derail $1 million federal operation and cost the city far more than his entire annual budget. Officer Tyler Briggs, 22 years old, barely 5 weeks out of the academy, had been patrolling a residential area after a vague report of suspicious gang activity. At 9:47 a.m., his body camera captured him sprinting toward a black man in tactical pants and a dark jacket, standing calmly beside an unmarked SUV. Briggs barked orders, shouted about detaining a possible gang member, and demanded ID with trembling bravado. What he didn't know, what he didn't bother to assess, is that the man he confronted was a U.S. Marshal conducting a covert fugitive arrest operation only 2 blocks away. Within seconds, Briggs's assumptions, adrenaline, and unchecked bias would trigger a scandal, compromise a high-risk federal mission, and end with a lawsuit that reshaped the department. Before we continue, where are you watching from? If this is your first time here, please hit subscribe. Stories like these need to be shared, and your support helps us bring more truth to light.
Brook Hill Estates, a middle-class residential neighborhood on the outskirts of Columbus, Ohio. Tree-lined streets, single-family homes with small yards, the kind of area where people know their neighbors and take pride in maintaining their properties. Morning on a Tuesday in early May meant school buses, people leaving for work, the normal rhythm of suburban life. Deputy U.S. Marshal Darius Thompson, 38 years old, stood beside his unmarked black Chevrolet Suburban at 9:47 a.m., 2 blocks from a house where a federal fugitive was believed to be hiding. Darius wore tactical pants, a dark blue jacket with police printed on the back in small yellow letters, and a radio earpiece. His federal credentials were clipped to his belt, clearly visible. He was coordinating the final positioning of his fugitive task force. 6 other federal agents, positioned at strategic points around the target house, preparing for a high-risk arrest. The fugitive, Marcus Williams, was wanted on federal charges: armed robbery of a credit union, assault on a federal officer during his initial escape, and weapons trafficking. He was considered armed and extremely dangerous. The U.S. Marshal Service had tracked him for 3 months across 4 states before finally locating him at his girlfriend's house in Brook Hill Estates. The operation had taken weeks of surveillance, coordination with local law enforcement command, and careful planning to minimize risk to civilians in the residential neighborhood. Darius had been with the Marshal Service for 12 years, previously served 8 years as military police in the Army, and specialized in tracking violent fugitives. He led a task force that had captured over 200 fugitives with a perfect safety record: no civilian injuries, no officer casualties, methodical and professional operations that prioritized public safety. That morning, he was doing exactly what he'd done hundreds of times before: coordinating final positions via encrypted radio, confirming sight lines, ensuring all team members understood the arrest plan. His SUV was parked on a residential street with a clear view of the target house, 2 blocks away. His posture was relaxed and alert, his movements deliberate and calm. Everything about his presence communicated law enforcement professional, if you knew what to look for. Officer Tyler Briggs didn't know what to look for. Briggs was 22 years old, 5 weeks removed from police academy graduation, assigned to routine patrol in the Brook Hill Estate sector. His training evaluations had included concerning notes. Officer Briggs demonstrates excessive enthusiasm that sometimes manifests as reckless urgency, tends to escalate situations based on limited information, would benefit from additional mentoring on threat assessment and de-escalation. But the department was understaffed, and Briggs met minimum qualifications, so he'd been cleared for solo patrol.
That morning, Briggs had received a vague dispatch call. Possible suspicious activity, Brook Hill Estates area. Caller reports seeing someone in gang clothing loitering near vehicles. No specific location, no description beyond gang clothing, no reported crime. Just a resident's unease translated into a dispatch call that would derail a federal operation. Briggs drove through the neighborhood looking for anything that matched his understanding of gang clothing, which essentially meant any black person dressed casually. When he saw Darius standing beside the unmarked SUV wearing tactical pants and a dark jacket, his immediate thought wasn't law enforcement conducting an operation. His thought was gang member casing vehicles, and that assumption drove everything that followed. Briggs' Axon Bodycam activated as he pulled his patrol car to a quick stop and exited fast, his movements hurried and aggressive. The footage captured his sprint across the street, his breathing rapid with adrenaline, his hand already moving toward his service weapon. "Hey, don't move! Put your hands where I can see them!" Darius turned, his expression shifting from focused concentration to immediate recognition of a problem. After 12 years as a federal agent, he knew instantly what was happening. A rookie officer who'd seen a black man and made assumptions without gathering information. Darius's hands moved slowly to a neutral position at his sides, palms visible. "Officer, I'm Deputy U.S. Marshal Darius Thompson. I'm conducting a federal fugitive apprehension operation 2 blocks from this location. My credentials are on my belt. My radio traffic is encrypted federal communications. I need you to step back immediately." But Briggs wasn't listening. He was operating on adrenaline and assumption, his training failure manifesting as doubling down rather than pausing to assess. "I said don't move. You're being detained for investigation." "Officer, look at my jacket. It says police on the back. Look at my belt. Federal credentials clearly visible. I'm a U.S. Marshal. You need to check with your dispatch about federal operations in this area before you compromise an active arrest." Briggs circled slightly, saw the credentials holder, saw the police marking on the jacket. But instead of immediately recognizing his error, his rookie ego took over. "Anyone can get tactical gear. Show me your ID with your hands behind your back." Darius's voice remained calm but carried unmistakable authority and warning now. "I'm not putting my hands behind my back. I'm a federal agent coordinating a high-risk fugitive apprehension operation 2 blocks from this location. My Europe presence here is being broadcast on an unsecured radio channel that could alert our target. You need to leave this area immediately and contact your supervisor." The Bodycam captured what happened next with perfect clarity. Briggs pulled out his handcuffs and stepped forward. "Turn around, now. You're under arrest for suspicious activity and failure to comply." Darius pulled his federal credentials from his belt and held them up, the gold marshal's badge catching sunlight, the identification card clearly visible with his photo, name, and official designation. Deputy U.S. Marshal, federal badge, federal operation. You are compromising a fugitive apprehension and committing obstruction of justice. Briggs froze, his face going pale as his brain finally processed what he was seeing. But the damage was done. Darius's encrypted radio crackled with voices from other team members. Marshal Thompson, we have movement at the target house. Suspect may be aware of police presence. Do we proceed or abort? If you saw this confrontation on Bodycam with zero context, what would your first reaction be?
The Bodycam footage that would later be released showed the exact moment Darius's careful operation unraveled. His calm professional demeanor cracking slightly as he realized a rookie cop's assumptions had just endangered a high-risk federal arrest, put his team at risk, and potentially allowed an armed fugitive to become aware of law enforcement presence. Darius Thompson had joined the U.S. Marshals Service at age 26, immediately after completing his military service. He'd grown up in Cleveland, joined the Army at 18, served as military police in Iraq and Afghanistan, earned commendations for his tactical judgment and calm under pressure. When he returned stateside, the Marshals Service recruited him specifically for fugitive apprehension, the dangerous, high-skill work of tracking and capturing people who demonstrated willingness to run, hide, and often fight rather than face justice. Over 12 years, he'd become one of the service's most respected deputies. He tracked fugitives across international borders, coordinated multi-agency task forces, trained newer agents on tactical operations. His personnel file was filled with commendations, exemplary judgment in high-pressure situations, outstanding leadership during complex operations, demonstrates perfect balance of aggression and caution required for fugitive work. The operation that morning was typical of his assignments. A violent fugitive who'd evaded capture for months, finally located through patient investigative work and surveillance. Marcus Williams, the target, had robbed a credit union in Cincinnati 3 months earlier, fled during the initial police response, assaulted a pursuing officer with his vehicle, and disappeared. Federal warrants were issued. The Marshals Service took over the investigation. Darius's team had tracked Williams through associates, family members, and finally to his girlfriend's house in Brookhill Estates. They'd spent 2 weeks confirming he was there, documenting his patterns, identifying the safest time and approach for arrest. They'd coordinated with Columbus PD Command, not street-level patrol, but command staff who understood the need for operational security and the importance of not broadcasting federal actions on open radio channels. The operation that morning was textbook. 6 agents positioned around the house, 2 at the front door with a battering ram, 2 covering the back exit, 2 in vehicles ready to pursue if Williams fled. Darius was command, coordinating from a position with clear line of sight, maintaining radio contact, ready to call the arrest when all positions confirmed ready.
They were 30 seconds from executing the arrest warrant when Officer Tyler Briggs pulled up behind Darius's SUV and began shouting orders. The encrypted radio traffic captured the immediate impact. Command, we have local patrol on your position. Subject is moving inside the house. Command, do we hold or proceed? Command, suspect just looked out front window. He's seen the patrol car. Darius had to make a split-second decision while dealing with Briggs, continue the operation with their cover potentially blown, risking a shootout in a residential neighborhood if Williams decided to fight, or abort, regroup, hope Williams didn't flee before they could reset. He made the call. All units, hold position. Do not approach target house. Local patrol has compromised operational security. We abort and regroup. The disappointment in his voice was audible even through the radio transmission. 3 months of investigation, 2 weeks of surveillance, perfect positioning, all of it disrupted because a rookie cop saw a black man in tactical clothing and assumed gang member rather than federal agent. By the time Briggs finally understood what he'd done, federal credentials in hand, radio traffic making it clear this was a coordinated law enforcement operation, Williams had seen the patrol car, recognized law enforcement presence, and begun preparing to flee. Darius's team managed to prevent this escape by quickly repositioning, but the arrest became far more dangerous than planned, requiring a forced entry and physical struggle that injured one agent and resulted in property damage to the girlfriend's house. All of it could have been avoided if Briggs had taken 30 seconds to assess the situation before confronting Darius. Have you ever seen a situation where one small mistake caused huge consequences? Officer Tyler Briggs stood frozen in the street, Darius's federal credentials in his hands, the weight of his error settling over him like physical pressure. He'd been on the force 5 weeks. In those 5 weeks, he'd made 17 stops. 14 of those stops had involved black individuals. 13 of those stops had yielded no citations, arrests, or evidence of criminal activity. Briggs hadn't been trained to recognize those numbers as problematic. He'd been trained to trust his instincts, to respond to suspicious behavior, to prioritize officer safety above de-escalation. But his instincts were shaped by bias he'd never examined. His definition of suspicious was influenced by stereotypes he'd absorbed from media, culture, and the unspoken messages about who poses threats and who deserves scrutiny. When he'd received the dispatch call about gang clothing, he'd immediately formed a mental image. Young black man in baggy clothes, possibly armed, probably engaged in criminal activity. That image was so firmly established in his mind that when he saw Darius, a 38-year-old federal agent in professional tactical gear, his brain had simply projected the stereotype onto reality. The body cam footage captured his breathing, rapid, shallow, adrenaline-fueled. Captured his hand movements, jerky, uncertain, compensating for inexperience with aggression. Captured his voice, trying to sound authoritative, but coming across as shaky and uncertain. Everything about his physical presence communicated rookie officer trying to project confidence he didn't actually possess. His training had taught him to give commands forcefully, to control situations through dominance, to treat non-compliance as resistance. But his training hadn't adequately taught him when not to engage, how to assess before acting, or how to recognize when his assumptions might be wrong. The tactical gear should have been his first clue. Professionals wear tactical pants and jackets with police markings. The unmarked SUV should have been second. Expensive vehicle, federal plates visible if he'd bothered to look. The calm demeanor should have been third. Someone engaged in criminal activity doesn't typically stand casually in broad daylight on a residential street. The credentials visible on Darius's belt should have been fourth. But Briggs had bypassed all those clues because his first thought, black man in this neighborhood must be suspicious, had overridden his ability to gather and process information. Now he stood in the street, watching federal agents execute a now compromised arrest 2 blocks away, listening to radio traffic describing how the operation he'd disrupted was proceeding with elevated risk, and beginning to understand that his career in law enforcement would likely be measured in days rather than years. Darius walked back to his SUV without another word to Briggs. He had more important things to do than educate a rookie who just cost the Marshal's Service months of investigative work and potentially put his team at risk. He pulled out his phone and called his supervisor at the Columbus field office. "Sir, we executed the Williams warrant. Subject in custody, 1 agent, minor injuries during struggle. Operation was compromised by local patrol officer who detained me during final positioning, broadcast our presence on open radio channels, and alerted the target. I need you to contact Columbus PD Command and initiate a formal complaint about interference with federal operations." Do you think rookies should have different rules when responding to vague or racially biased tips? Within 3 hours, Officer Tyler Briggs was placed on administrative leave pending an internal investigation. Within 6 hours, the body cam footage had been uploaded to secure servers and was being reviewed by Internal Affairs, the U.S. Marshal's Service, and federal attorneys from the Department of Justice. Within 12 hours, the story had leaked to media outlets. Local cop disrupts federal fugitive arrest, detains U.S. Marshal. The body cam footage was damning in its clarity. It showed Briggs approaching at a sprint, shouting commands before gathering any information. It showed Darius immediately identifying himself as a federal agent. It showed Briggs ignoring that identification and attempting to arrest him anyway. It showed the exact moment the operation was compromised, captured in the background audio of encrypted radio traffic reporting suspect awareness of police presence. The U.S. Marshals Service filed a formal complaint with Columbus PD documenting the interference. The complaint detailed, Officer Briggs initiated contact with a federal agent conducting official duties. Officer Briggs ignored visible credentials and clear identification. Officer Briggs's presence and use of marked patrol car alerted the fugitive target. Officer Briggs's actions forced the operation to proceed under compromised conditions. Officer Briggs's actions resulted in elevated risk to federal agents and civilians. One federal agent sustained injuries during the arrest that might have been preventable if the operation had proceeded as planned. The U.S. Marshals Service filed a formal complaint with Columbus PD, documenting the interference.
His training file showed the warnings that had been noted but not addressed. His field training officer's final evaluation had included, Officer Briggs would benefit from additional supervised patrol before solo assignment. He demonstrates tendency to act on assumptions rather than gathered facts. That recommendation had been overridden by staffing needs. The dispatch call that had sent Briggs to Brookhill Estates that morning was traced and analyzed. An elderly white resident had called about suspicious gang activity, which turned out to be her description of seeing a black man in tactical clothing standing near vehicles. No crime reported, no specific behavior described beyond looks suspicious. The dispatcher had logged it as routine suspicious person call without questioning whether the caller's perception of gang activity was based on actual evidence. The fugitive Williams had indeed become aware of police presence when he saw Briggs's marked patrol car pull up 2 blocks from his location. He'd immediately begun preparing to flee, grabbing a backpack with cash and a loaded handgun, heading toward the back door. The marshals had been forced to execute the arrest immediately rather than waiting for his girlfriend to leave the house as planned, resulting in the girlfriend being present during the forced entry, traumatizing her children who were home, and the physical struggle that injured an agent when Williams tried to fight his way past the entry team. All of that elevated risk, trauma, and injury stemmed directly from Briggs's interference. The body cam footage was released publicly through a Freedom of Information request filed by a journalist within a week. The video went viral immediately, viewed over 15 million times in the first 48 hours across various platforms. Comments reflected widespread outrage. Imagine being so racist you try to arrest a U.S. Marshal with his badge clearly visible. That rookie's entire career lasted 5 weeks. He saw a black man and his brain immediately thought gang member instead of noticing all the obvious signs of law enforcement. Federal agents do dangerous work. Having to deal with rookie cops who can't control their bias makes it even more dangerous. Should body cam recordings always be released when police interfere with federal operations?
Darius Thompson filed a comprehensive federal lawsuit 8 weeks after the incident. The complaint named Officer Tyler Briggs individually, his field training supervisor who'd cleared him for solo duty despite documented concerns, and the Columbus Police Department. The legal claims were extensive. Count 1. Obstruction of federal law enforcement. Briggs interfered with a federal fugitive apprehension operation, compromising operational security and endangering federal agents. Count 2. Fourth Amendment violation, unlawful detention. Briggs detained Darius without reasonable suspicion despite visible federal credentials and clear identification of official status. Count 3. 14th Amendment violation, racial discrimination.
Briggs's stop was motivated by racial bias, as evidenced by his pattern of disproportionate stops of black individuals and his immediate assumption that a black man in tactical gear was a gang member rather than law enforcement. Count 4. Assault on a federal officer. Attempting to physically restrain a federal officer engaged in official duties constituted assault under federal law. Count 5. Intentional infliction of emotional distress. Being detained and having a critical operation compromised caused significant professional and emotional harm. Count 6. Municipal liability. Columbus PD's inadequate training, failure to supervise Briggs properly, and pattern of ignoring documented concerns enabled the constitutional and federal law violations. The lawsuit sought $12 million in damages, termination of Officer Briggs, and comprehensive reforms to training, supervision, and stop pattern monitoring. The city's defense attorneys reviewed the evidence and quickly recognized they had no viable position. The body cam footage was indefensible. The operational damage to a federal investigation was documented. Briggs's stop pattern proved racial bias. His training file showed the department had ignored warning signs. Settlement negotiations began within 4 months. The city's initial offer was $2 million. Darius's attorneys rejected it, arguing that the settlement needed to reflect both the personal violation and the institutional failure that endangered a federal operation. The city increased to $5 million, still rejected. Finally, understanding that trial would likely result in an even larger verdict, plus extensive legal costs and continued negative publicity, the city agreed to settle for $8.5 million. The settlement included $8.5 million payment to Darius Thompson, Officer Tyler Briggs terminated for cause, post-certification revoked, National Decertification Index entry, and permanent bar from law enforcement employment.
Comprehensive department reforms. All patrol officers required to check dispatch for federal operations before responding to vague suspicious person calls. Mandatory bias training quarterly with testing and accountability. Extended field training to minimum 16 weeks with no exceptions. Monthly review of stop patterns by race with supervisory intervention for statistical disparities. Zero tolerance policy for stops based solely on vague caller perceptions without specific criminal activity. Formal protocol for coordinating with federal law enforcement on operations in city jurisdiction. Public acknowledgement. Written statement acknowledging Briggs's conduct violated federal law and constitutional rights, endangered federal agents, and reflected training and supervision failures. Federal liaison position. Creation of new position coordinating federal-local operations to prevent future interference. The Columbus PD held a press conference announcing the settlement. The police chief stood at a podium, clearly uncomfortable, reading a prepared statement. The actions of Officer Tyler Briggs on May 7th were unacceptable and violated our department's standards. His interference with the federal fugitive operation endangered lives and reflected failures in our training and supervision systems. We have implemented comprehensive reforms to ensure similar incidents do not occur. We extend our sincere apology to Deputy U.S. Marshal Thompson for this incident. The federal agencies involved issued their own statement. Law enforcement at all levels must work cooperatively to serve the public. Local officers must be trained to recognize and respect federal operations, particularly those involving dangerous fugitives. The incident in Columbus demonstrates what happens when training fails and bias operates unchecked. Officer Tyler Briggs, now 22 years old, with a 5-week law enforcement career destroyed, released no public statement. His attorney issued a brief comment. Officer Briggs regrets the incident and wishes Marshal Thompson well.
The statement satisfied no one and was widely criticized as inadequate given the severity of his actions. The reforms implemented in Columbus showed immediate results. Officers completing the extended training program demonstrated significantly better judgment in stop decisions. The bias training with accountability measures reduced stop disparities by 52% in the first year. The early warning system identified and retrained officers showing concerning patterns before they escalated to serious violations.
Darius Thompson's case wasn't unique, just uniquely documented and uniquely consequential. Research and reporting over the years has revealed pattern after pattern of black professionals being misidentified, challenged, or detained by officers who couldn't imagine they might be colleagues, authority figures, or simply citizens going about lawful business. Black firefighters arriving at emergency scenes have been stopped by police who assumed they were looters. Black federal agents conducting investigations have been questioned about their presence in buildings they were assigned to inspect. Black judges have been challenged entering their own courtrooms. Black military personnel in uniform have been stopped and questioned about their right to be on base. Black doctors have been prevented from providing emergency medical care because officers assumed they couldn't possibly be medical professionals. The pattern reveals something fundamental about how bias operates. It overrides evidence, ignores credentials, dismisses professional markers, and sees only skin color. A federal badge becomes possibly fake. Tactical gear becomes gang clothing. Calm professional demeanor becomes suspicious behavior. Darius continued his work with the Marshal Service, but the incident left lasting impact. He'd spent 12 years building a reputation for flawless operations, and having one compromised by a rookie's racism became part of his permanent record, not through any fault of his own, but through the failure of systems that cleared an unsuitable officer for patrol. 3 years after the incident, he reflected in an interview. "I've arrested some of the most dangerous fugitives in the country. Our coordinated operations across international borders. I've never had an operation compromised by the people I was trying to apprehend. They're professionals in their own way. They know how to evade surveillance. But a 5-week rookie saw me and thought gang member, instead of noticing the federal badge, the tactical gear, the unmarked SUV with federal plates, the encrypted radio equipment. That's not a training failure. That's a bias failure, and it nearly got my team hurt." The body cam footage remains in training archives, used by police academies and federal law enforcement programs as an example of how assumptions destroy operations and violate rights. Briggs approaching at a sprint, Darius identifying himself immediately, Briggs ignoring visible credentials. The operation compromised, the settlement costing millions. The lesson should be obvious. Gather information before acting. Verify before confronting. Recognize that black people in professional clothing might actually be professionals. Understand that federal agents come in all races. Know that assumptions cost careers, endanger operations, and violate rights. But the lesson has to be taught repeatedly because the bias is deeply embedded. Because officers are still being trained to see threats before humanity. Because systems still prioritize filling patrol cars over properly preparing the people who wear the uniforms. Because the cost of failure is borne by those who are assumed criminal until they prove otherwise. Why do so many officers see danger first and humanity second when the subject is black? If you believe these stories matter, if you think officers who compromise federal operations through racial bias should lose their badge.
Sir, what are you doing in this neighborhood?
Walking my dog. Why?
Don't get smart. I know you're making plans for your next robbery.
Sir, that's racist.
Let me see some ID before this becomes a problem.
Defense attorney, you just crossed the legal line. Your body cam footage is about to cost you a whole lot more than your job.
The officer's body camera clicks on mid-stride, already moving fast, already angry. A quiet residential sidewalk, morning sunlight, a small dog sniffing at the grass. And then, the officer steps directly into the path of a black man in joggers, leash in one hand, coffee in the other. Officer, voice sharp, breath tight,
Hey, stop right there. What are you really doing in this neighborhood? The man blinks, confused, dog tugging lightly on the leash. Walking my dog, is there an issue? But the officer wasn't listening. He was leaning forward, squinting, making assumptions. And then he said something that would later cost the city $25 million. You planning your next robbery? I know how guys like you operate. In that moment, everything changed. Because this guy was attorney Marcus Hale, one of the most feared defense lawyers in the state, and the officer had no idea. Before we continue, where are you watching from? If this is your first time here, hit that subscribe button. Stories like these need to be shared, and your support helps us bring more truth to light.
Riverside Heights, a suburban neighborhood about 20 miles outside Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Tree-lined streets, well-maintained homes in the $400,000 range, the kind of area where people commute downtown for work and return home to quiet evenings. The neighborhood had a reputation for being safe, orderly, the kind of place young families chose specifically because nothing dramatic ever happened. But on a Tuesday afternoon in late September, Riverside Heights was the active surveillance zone for a months-long federal narcotics operation. Operation Nightfall, run by the DEA's Philadelphia division, had been tracking a sophisticated fentanyl distribution network that moved product through suburban areas using seemingly legitimate businesses as cover. The investigation involved wiretaps, financial analysis, informant testimony, and extensive physical surveillance. Special Agent Marcus Daniels, 38 years old, had been with the DEA for 12 years. He'd worked narcotics cases from street-level dealers to international trafficking organizations, specialized in long-term undercover operations, and had a reputation for patience, discipline, and the ability to maintain cover under pressure. He was deep into hour 12 of surveillance that Tuesday, rotating between 3 different unmarked vehicles, circling predetermined routes, documenting activity patterns of key targets who lived and operated in Riverside Heights. Marcus drove a nondescript gray sedan, dressed in civilian clothes, jeans, a plain t-shirt, baseball cap. Nothing about his appearance suggested law enforcement. That was the point. He'd been circling the same 6-block area for the past hour, part of establishing normal presence, so that when the operation moved to the arrest phase, suspects wouldn't remember seeing him only on the day of the takedown. Surveillance 101. Blend in by being consistently present. Officer Justin Crawford was 23 years old, 5 months out of the academy, cleared for solo patrol after the minimum field training period. His training officers had noted concerns. Officer Crawford demonstrates eagerness that sometimes manifests as over-aggressive response to routine situations, tends to see suspicious activity in normal behavior, would benefit from additional mentoring on de-escalation and community policing. But the department needed bodies on patrol, and Crawford met the minimum standards, so he'd been cleared. Crawford was driving his assigned route through Riverside Heights when he noticed the gray sedan circling for the second time. A car he didn't recognize, driven by a black man, moving through an affluent white neighborhood. To Crawford, that combination registered as suspicious. His training, inadequate and enforcement-focused, hadn't taught him to consider legitimate reasons for circling behavior. Surveillance, delivery work, rideshare driving, looking for addresses. He just knew circling was mentioned in academy lessons about casing for burglaries. Crawford activated his body cam and pulled his patrol car behind the sedan at a stop sign. Marcus noticed a police car, but wasn't concerned initially. He was a federal agent conducting active surveillance operation. He had credentials. Nothing about the situation suggested a problem. Crawford exited his patrol car and approached with his hand already resting on his duty belt, his posture communicating suspicion from the first step. "Sir, keep your hands where I can see them." Marcus turned, his expression shifting from neutral to mildly confused. "For what?" "You've been circling this block. That's suspicious behavior. Step out of the vehicle." Marcus stayed in his car, his voice calm and professional. "That's called doing my job." Crawford's hand moved closer to his service weapon. "Step out of the vehicle now." Marcus recognized immediately what was happening. A rookie who'd seen a black man in a white neighborhood and decided that was sufficient cause for a stop. He dealt with situations like this before, though usually he could flash credentials and resolve things quickly. He stepped out slowly, hands visible, his demeanor completely non-threatening. "I need you to see your license and registration." "Officer, before we go further, I need you to know that I'm a federal agent conducting an active surveillance operation.
I'm going to reach for my credentials slowly. Watch my hands. Crawford's breathing quickened. Don't reach for anything. Keep your hands where I can see them. I'm trying to show you that I'm DEA. I have credentials in my jacket pocket. I said don't move. Have you ever seen someone stay this calm while being profiled? Tell me your thoughts below.
Marcus kept his hands visible at chest level, his voice remaining steady despite the absurdity of the situation. Officer, my name is Special Agent Marcus Daniels. I'm with the Drug Enforcement Administration. I've been conducting surveillance as part of Operation Nightfall, a federal narcotics investigation. If you'll let me show you my credentials, we can resolve this quickly and I can get back to work. Crawford's face flushed. Being told he was wrong by someone he'd decided was suspicious triggered his worst instincts. I don't care what you claim to be. You were engaging in suspicious behavior. Now you're refusing to comply with lawful orders. That's obstruction. I'm not refusing to comply. I'm trying to identify myself as a federal agent so you understand why I'm here. Turn around and put your hand behind your back. Marcus's jaw tightened. He'd maintained perfect composure, but this was crossing into genuinely problematic territory. Officer, I strongly advise you not to detain a federal agent during an active investigation. That creates significant legal and operational problems for everyone involved. Crawford's hand moved to his handcuffs. His radio crackled. Dispatch asking for his status. His voice trembled when he responded. Show me 1015, one subject detained for suspicious activity and obstruction. Marcus made a decision. He slowly reached into his jacket pocket, movements deliberate and visible, and pulled out his DEA credentials. The gold badge caught sunlight, impossible to miss. He held it at eye level so Crawford could see clearly. Drug Enforcement Administration. Special Agent Marcus Daniels, DEA. I'm in the middle of an active narcotics operation that your interference is currently compromising. I need you to step back, call your supervisor, and let me explain the situation before this gets worse. Crawford froze, his eyes fixed on the badge, his face going pale as his brain processed what he was seeing. This was the moment his career changed trajectory, the instant where all those academy warnings about rushing to judgment manifested in catastrophic reality. But instead of backing down, Crawford's ego and panic combined into the worst possible response. I don't care what you claim to be. You were engaging in suspicious behavior. Now you're refusing to comply with lawful orders. That's obstruction. I'm not refusing to comply. I'm trying to identify myself as a federal agent so you understand why I'm here. Turn around and put your hands behind your back. Marcus's jaw tightened. He'd maintained perfect composure, but this was crossing into genuinely problematic territory. Officer, I strongly advise you not to detain a federal agent during an active undercover operation. That creates significant legal and operational problems for everyone involved. Crawford's hand moved to his handcuffs. His radio crackled. Dispatch asking for his status. His voice trembled when he responded. Show me 1015, one subject detained for suspicious activity and obstruction. Marcus made a decision. He slowly reached into his jacket pocket, movements deliberate and visible, and pulled out his DEA credentials. The gold badge caught sunlight, impossible to miss. He held it at eye level so Crawford could see clearly. Drug Enforcement Administration, Special Agent Marcus Daniels, DEA. I'm in the middle of an active narcotics operation that your interference is currently compromising. I need you to step back, call your supervisor, and let me explain the situation before this gets worse. Crawford froze, his eyes fixed on the badge, his face going pale as his brain processed what he was seeing. This was the moment his career changed trajectory, the instant where all those academy warnings about rushing to judgment manifested in catastrophic reality. But instead of backing down, Crawford's ego and panic combined into the worst possible response. I need to verify those credentials. Anyone can get a fake badge. Turn around, now. You want to verify federal credentials? Call your supervisor. Call the DEA Philadelphia office. They'll confirm my identity in 30 seconds. But do not attempt to detain me. 2 more patrol cars pulled up, responding to Crawford's radio call. Officers Ryan Kelly and Sarah Martinez stepped out, assessing the situation. Their rookie colleague confronting a black man beside an unmarked car, hands near weapons, tension high. Martinez approached quickly. Crawford, what's happening? Subject was circling the block, acting suspicious. He's refusing to comply and claiming to be DEA.
Marcus turned to Martinez, holding his credentials up again. "I'm Special Agent Marcus Daniels, DEA. I've been conducting federal surveillance in this area for the past 4 hours as part of Operation Nightfall, a federal narcotics investigation. If you'll let me show you my credentials, we can resolve this quickly and I can get back to work." Martinez examined the credentials carefully. They looked authentic. The badge was real metal with proper DEA insignia. The identification card had all the security features and holographic elements of genuine federal credentials. Her instincts told her this man was exactly who he claimed to be. "Crawford, did you call a supervisor before initiating this stop?" "He was circling suspiciously." "That's not an answer. Did you have reasonable suspicion of a specific crime?" "He matched the behavior pattern for casing houses." Martinez pulled out her radio. "Dispatch, can you contact DEA Philadelphia Division and verify credentials for Special Agent Marcus Daniels?" Within 2 minutes, dispatch confirmed. Marcus Daniels was a DEA special agent, currently assigned to an active investigation in the Riverside Heights area, and his supervisors were extremely unhappy that one of their agents was being detained by local police. Martinez turned to Crawford, her voice low but unmistakably angry. "You just stopped a federal agent during an active undercover operation. Do you understand what you've done?" Crawford's face had gone from pale to gray. His hands were shaking. He was circling." "Get in your car. Drive back to the station. Don't talk to anyone. Wait for the sergeant." As Crawford walked back to his patrol car, Marcus was already on his phone with his supervisor, explaining that his cover might be compromised, that targets in the area might have noticed the police stop, that months of surveillance work could be damaged because a rookie couldn't distinguish between legitimate activity and suspicious behavior. "If you were the agent, would you have stayed calm or snapped? Let me know."
By Wednesday morning, the DEA's Philadelphia division had filed a formal complaint with the local police department. Special Agent in charge Jennifer Martinez, no relation to Officer Martinez, sent a scathing letter to the police chief outlining how Officer Crawford's reckless stop had compromised an active federal investigation, exposed an undercover agent, and potentially alerted targets that they were under surveillance. The letter detailed the operational damage. Surveillance teams had to be pulled back, target patterns were disrupted, informant meetings were delayed, and the timeline for arrests had been pushed back by weeks while they assessed whether the operation's security had been breached. The estimated cost of the delay and restructuring exceeded $2 million in federal resources. Police Chief Robert Thompson watched Crawford's Bodycam footage 3 times, each viewing making him feel worse. He could see everything. Crawford approaching with aggression rather than curiosity, escalating without cause, refusing to accept credentials, maintaining his confrontational posture even after the badge was shown. It was textbook bad policing, the kind of incident that generates lawsuits and federal intervention. He called Internal Affairs immediately. "I need a complete investigation of the Crawford stop. Pull everything, his training records, his stop history, his supervisor evaluations, and I need it done fast because we're about to get sued by a federal agent." The IA investigation revealed patterns that should have prevented Crawford from being cleared for solo patrol. His academy evaluations included multiple warnings about presumptive judgment and difficulty distinguishing routine behavior from criminal activity. His field training officer had recommended an additional month of supervised patrol before clearance. That recommendation had been overruled by staffing needs. More damaging, Crawford had made 17 stops in his 5 months of solo patrol. 12 of those involved black drivers or pedestrians. Of those 12, 11 were released without citation or arrest after the stop revealed no criminal activity. The pattern suggested racial profiling, though no one had analyzed the data until now because he was too new to have triggered attention. Crawford was placed on immediate administrative leave. The department's statement was brief and non-committal. "An incident involving one of our officers is under investigation. The officer has been placed on leave pending review. But everyone involved knew where this was heading. Do you think the rookie deserves a second chance, or was this the end? Drop your opinion." Marcus Daniels filed a federal civil rights lawsuit 4 weeks after the incident.
His attorney, James Richardson from the Philadelphia Civil Rights Law Center, structured the complaint to maximize both legal liability and public impact. Count 1, Fourth Amendment violation, unlawful stop and detention. Officer Crawford stopped Marcus without reasonable suspicion of criminal activity. Circling a block is not inherently suspicious and does not justify detention. Count 2, Fourth Amendment violation, unlawful detention after identification. Crawford continued detention even after Marcus identified himself as a federal agent and showed credentials, compounding the initial violation. Count 3, interference with federal law enforcement operations. Crawford's actions compromised an active DEA investigation, resulting in operational delays and resource waste. Count 4, racial profiling. The stop was motivated by racial bias, as evidenced by Crawford's patterns of disproportionately stopping black individuals and his inability to articulate reasonable suspicion. Count 5, emotional distress.
Being unlawfully detained while attempting to perform federal duties caused professional embarrassment and personal distress. Count 6, municipal liability. The department's inadequate training, failure to properly supervise Crawford, and decision to clear him for solo patrol despite documented concerns created the conditions for constitutional violations. The lawsuit sought $12 million in damages, termination of Officer Crawford, and comprehensive reforms to training and accountability. The city's attorneys reviewed the evidence and quickly recognized they had no viable defense. The body cam footage showed everything. Crawford's training file documented the warnings that were ignored. His stop pattern proved racial bias. Marcus's federal credentials and the DEA's confirmation eliminated any claim that Crawford's suspicions were legitimate. They attempted to settle early, offering $400,000. Richardson rejected it immediately. My client is a decorated federal agent who was racially profiled and detained while conducting national security work. The department ignored warning signs about this officer and cleared him for duty anyway. We're going to trial. The trial took place 11 months after the incident. The jury watched the body cam footage on a large screen in the courtroom. They saw Crawford approach with immediate suspicion, heard him refuse to accept credentials, watched him continue escalating even after the badge was shown. The footage was so clear, so indefensible, that some jurors shook their heads while watching. Expert witnesses testified about racial profiling patterns, about proper protocols for encountering federal agents, about the operational damage caused to DEA investigations. Marcus testified calmly and professionally about the humiliation of being treated as a criminal while doing his job. Crawford's testimony was catastrophic for the defense. When asked why he stopped Marcus, he claimed suspicious circling behavior. When asked what made circling suspicious, he couldn't provide a clear answer. When shown his stop pattern, 12 stops of black individuals in 5 months, 11 yielding no violations, he claimed it was coincidence. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. They returned with a verdict, $10 million in damages, apportioned as $4 million compensatory and $6 million punitive. The punitive damages sent a clear message. This wasn't just negligence. It was reckless disregard for constitutional rights that deserved additional penalty. If you were on that jury, how much would you have awarded? I'm curious. Officer Justin Crawford was terminated 6 days after the verdict. The termination letter was direct. Officer Crawford's actions violated department policy, ignored his training, and resulted in a $10 million judgment against the city. His pattern of stops suggests racial bias. His refusal to accept federal credentials demonstrated poor judgment. He is unsuitable for law enforcement. His POST certification was revoked. His name entered the National Decertification Index. He applied to several other departments over the following year. All rejected him. The case had been too public, the body cam footage too damaging, the price tag too high. He became a cautionary tale used in police academies. This is what happens when you let bias drive your decisions. Special Agent Marcus Daniels continued his DEA career, though the incident left lasting impact. He'd spent 12 years building credibility and maintaining cover integrity, and a 5-month rookie had compromised an operation in minutes. The $10 million provided compensation, but money couldn't restore operational security or erase the professional frustration. In an interview after the settlement, he reflected, "I face actual danger in this job. Armed traffickers, undercover operations that could turn deadly, situations where split-second decisions matter.
But I've never felt as powerless as I did standing there with my federal credentials in hand, being treated like a criminal by someone who should have known better. That's the reality of being black in America. Even a badge can't always protect you from bias. The police department implemented comprehensive reforms mandated by the settlement, extended field training to 6 months minimum, bias recognition testing before solo patrol clearance, monthly analysis of stop patterns by race, civilian oversight of excessive stop complaints, and mandatory de-escalation training quarterly. Stop data from the following year showed significant improvement. The racial disparity in stops without cause dropped by 53%. Officers who showed concerning patterns were identified early and given additional training or removed from patrol. The reforms worked, proving that accountability combined with systemic change can produce measurable results. But the broader lesson was about the cost of bias. Not just financial, though $10 million makes that concrete, but operational, professional, and human. A rookie officer's unchecked assumptions compromised a federal investigation, destroyed his own career, and exposed his department's failures in training and oversight. What lesson do you think departments should take from this? Comment below. The Bodycam footage remains in training archives, shown to new officers with the simple caption, "How Not to Police." Marcus Daniels' case serves as a reminder that badges and credentials don't eliminate racial bias, that federal agents can be profiled just like civilians, and that the cost of assumptions extends far beyond individual encounters. If you believe these stories matter, if you think officers should face real consequences for racial profiling, hit that subscribe button. We're exposing how inadequate training and unchecked bias create million-dollar disasters. We're demanding departments prioritize proper preparation over quick staffing. We're fighting for a system where doing your job while black doesn't require defending your legitimacy to rookies who mistake bias for instinct.